Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. In 1841, Charles Mackay wrote a book, Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. Modern prophecies, an epidemic terror of the end of the world has several times spread over the nations. The most remarkable was that which seized Christendom about the middle of the 10th century. Numbers of fanatics appeared in France, Germany, and Italy at the time, prophesying that the world's duration was about to expire. During the 1000th year, the number of pilgrims increased. Most of them were smitten with terror as with a plague. Every phenomenon of nature filled them with alarm. A thunderstorm sent them all upon their knees in mid-March. Now let's fast forward to December 2019. The Australian Broadcasting Corporation reports, Victoria Falls slows to a trickle, fueling fears of climate change. For decades, Victoria Falls has drawn millions of holidaymakers to Zimbabwe and Zambia to watch southern Africa's Zambezi River cascade down 100 meters into a gash in the earth. But the worst drought in a century has slowed the waterfalls to a trickle, fueling fears climate change could kill one of the region's biggest tourist attractions. In previous years when it gets dry, it's not to this extent. This is our first experience of seeing it like this. Dominic Nyambe, a seller of tourist handicrafts in his 30s, sat outside his shop in Livingston on the Zambian side. And here's nearly the identical story from 1950. Sioux City Journal, Wednesday, February 8, 1950. Victoria Falls dry as drought hits Africa. Victoria Falls recently fell away to a trickle, reaching the lowest level in living memory. Because of drought in the western highlands of Angola, the catchment area of the mighty Zambezi River and its two chief tributaries, the Great Falls and Rhodesia, are nothing more than a vast expanse of rock for great stretches along the brink. Where Livingstone once gazed across a mile of foaming, tumbling waters, there is only a series of stagnant pools. But there's a big difference in the 1950 article. There's no talk about fear or climate change. It's just normal weather. ABC News determined that it was the worst drought in a century based on the memory of some guy in his 30s. It's not too surprising that a guy born in the 1980s wouldn't remember the drought of the 1950s. And according to Weather Underground, it's typical for the falls to become starkly depleted in October and November just about every year. In 1992, The Guardian reported that Zimbabwe was a country dying of thirst due to drought. And in 1966, during the Ice Age scare, it was also reported that the worst drought of a century was devastating Africa. A few years later, in 1974, climatologists wanted to evacuate 6 million people from Africa in order to save them from global cooling. Climatologists have been raising fear about either global warming or global cooling for at least 45 years. That's how they raise funding. And that is how they've created extraordinary popular delusions and the madness of crowds. History repeats itself over and over again. People in the 21st century imagine themselves to be sophisticated, but there's no evidence to back that idea up. George Orwell said, "Every generation imagines itself to be more intelligent than the one that went before it and wiser than the one that comes after it." That's a delusion which every generation suffers from. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science and propaganda for a long time.